A word to the wise, okay? Black, white, and gray are your best friends, and this is the most valuable advice you will ever get from me as your instructor. Because outside of very rare exceptions, when a design revolves around it, as a well-considered, well-thought-out strategy, all typographic elements stay in neutral colors, either black, white, or gray. In other words, when you decide to make a typographic element colored, which I'm not saying can never ever happen, it has to be a strategy. It has to be a big strategy that you sit down and think about for a long, long time, make lots and lots of experiments, try out very different things, ask other people their opinions. So you really think about it. It's a strategy and not just something that you decided to do because you felt like it. Then you can do it. But normally, under normal circumstances, all typographic elements stay in neutral colors, either black, white, or gray. Backgrounds and additional non-typographic design elements, such as for example the icons in your logotype, can be colored. However, you should still consider that the more neutrals you have in your design scheme, the better the smaller amounts of color that you add to them will work. So, especially when it comes to big background areas, then you should always think about making them in more neutral colors than in very brightly colored ones, although there are lots and lots of exceptions where very brightly colored backgrounds work as well. But, to come back to it, because this is so important that I want to say it again and again, in terms of typographic elements, black, white, and gray are what you stick with. Outside of exceptions, where you really, really, really spend time thinking about it, and where a whole design strategy is actually based on colorized typography. Okay, now we can start. So, we are now at the color tutorial, and I'm starting with the Paletton Color Scheme Designer page, where I have already created a color scheme for my Tekir Efendi project. And since Tekir Efendi is a dry goods seller, and aktar in Turkish, they will be dealing with a lot of spices like cinnamon and ginger and things like that. So I've picked a kind of like a spicy color for the main color, this one right here. Then the adjacent colors are like this nice yellow and pink. And then the complementary color is a blue, which I can use for accents. Then what I did is, and I also obviously played with the fine-tuning of it. Whoops. And then I went here to export, and not color list but color swatches, and I exported the whole thing as a ACO file, which are Photoshop swatches. And then what I did is I came to Photoshop, opened the swatches palette, and just said import swatches, and here they are. So I've already done that, so I'm not going to show you that part of it. Now, what happened in class the other day is that one of you asked me to explain a little bit about all of these things here. What does HSB mean? What does RGB mean? And what do hex colors mean? So let me go into that before we get started with anything else. H means hue. So if I go here, see you have the rainbow right here, which is the same exact rainbow that is actually here. Same thing. So the hue is the actual color. So this right now is like an orange, but if I move it over, then this color will change. It's the color. So let's just keep it here. Saturation means the amount of pigment that's in that color. So how saturated with color is it? Renk doygunluğu, we call this in Turkish. Now, the maximum point of saturation that this color can have is this right here, and the minimum saturation that it can have is here. in which case it would be 0, and if we go all the way to the max, then it would be 100. Now, just to come back to hue, if I go to 0, that's red. On the RGB thing, that's red. Okay? But I'm going to go someplace else. Now the brightness is how much white or how much black does a color have. How light is it or how darkness is it? And this could also be called hue saturation lightness or hue saturation brightness. Both of them are used interchangeably. So the maximum amount of brightness, at which point it's 100 and the saturation is 100 as well, is this here. And if I bring it all the way down, it'll actually become black. Then it's 0 lightness, and then you see the 0 right here, and then you have all the in-between tones. However, when you want to make a color lighter, actually, then you probably also need to play with the saturation a bit. So, now let's get to the RGB. Now, the RGB looks completely different. This thing changes completely, and it is usually not used. We hardly ever use it when we are picking colors. Now, here the red is 97. Let's make that 100, and let's make this 0 and this 0. And the red would be here. This is the maximum point of red. This is the maximum point of green. And let me see. Let's actually try this. If I make this one 100, then it would this is the maximum point of blue, and the green would be right here. Now, when I make green 100, everything else becomes predominantly green, and the red is almost disappearing. If I make this 100, then you have much more red, and then if I make this 0 and make the blue 100, then the blue becomes predominant. But like I said, we don't really use the RGB palette to pick colors. What we stick with is the hue saturation brightness, because that gives us the whole thing all at once. It's much easier to work with, as you can see. I mean, it's very obvious. Now, there's one other thing that you would need to pay attention to. You have this little quotient triangle, the cut, when you get to certain colors. When the saturation is very high, then you will almost always get this quotient triangle. And what that means is, it means be careful. The color that you want to use, the color that you want to work with, will not work in the CMYK system. That's what it means, because right now we're in the RGB system, which is used for screen work, but the CMYK system is used for printing, printing in a print house, in a matbaa with offset printing. It's a 4-color scheme rather than a 3-color scheme. And what this is alerting us is that I mean, I would need to really come down here. It's still giving me that triangle. Now it's no longer giving me that triangle. Here it's giving me the triangle again. So it's alerting me to the fact that all of these colors would be problematic if I want to print them with CMYK, JMYK. Okay, now, as for hex colors, since it's very difficult to remember all of these values, right? If you're using HSP, you would need to remember that this is 119H, 61S, blah blah blah, and since they are in different boxes, it would be very difficult to copy paste these values. You would have to go back and forth and back and forth. So what they have come out with is a system which is called the hex color coding system, which are 6 figure numbers. They are a mixture of numbers and characters. Now, what we have in the computer is millions of colors, right? And nowadays we can also use that for web design and everything. We are working with millions of colors, and the hex system accommodates millions of combinations of these letters and numbers. So basically, what this is good for is if you want to just, let's say that you want to have this particular green, and you want to copy and paste that value exactly into another application. So for example, into the Wix editor for a web design or something like that, or whatever application, really, it doesn't make a difference. You would just simply take that and copy it and then paste it into the color box, the hex color box of that new of that application. And that's really what the hex colors are for. They are a very easy way of transferring colors from one application to the other. So that's what this part is all about. So basically, it's always the same thing, it's always the same color, it's just a different way of putting numerical value onto the color, okay? Or to come up with a coding scheme where you can very easily take whatever this combination is, the hex combination is, and copy pasting it into another application. So that's that part taken care of. I hope you got some kind of idea about how color coding works. So now let's continue on to the actual work here. Okay, I'm going to start with the centered one. Now, I added the date, which I had forgotten to do previously. And since this, as I'm looking at it, since this is a logotype that has all of these scrolls here, you know, this old-fashioned stuff, these very lovely script scrolls, what I'm thinking is that it might look really cool to have that kind of historic scroll type stuff added to this. So what I did is actually, whoops, let me go here and explain to you exactly what I did. Now, what I have on the drive, here, I'm actually at the correct place. I have a whole bunch of files that have these old-fashioned scrolls, like big collections of them. So I downloaded two of them, this one and this one here, and I opened them in Illustrator, as you can see. And I looked at them carefully, and there are some things here that I think might work very nicely with that design, except it will need some additions and things like that. So I took this one here, I took this one here, and then let me see, I took one other one, which I'm trying to spot here. I can't, but I can show it to you in Photoshop. I already imported them as smart objects. So that's one of them. That's the other one. And then that's the third one. Now, I put them behind the logotype here, and I already anticipated this. I already thought that this would probably happen. They are causing some legibility problems. We can't read it very easily. So we are going to have to figure out some ways of getting around that, of fixing that. So what could we do? Now let me open this here. This is now becoming important because we definitely need to stay above it. Let me go to the swatches. Let me pick like a gray like this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a background here. Because I have a feeling that it went above my lovely vectors. I have a feeling that if I have a dark background and also make this scrolly, flowery thing a little bit darker, which I'm going to do in a minute, then I think this is going to work provided that the type becomes white, of course. So with the stroke I also need to make it white. Here it is. Now let's go to the color overlay. Oh, I forgot to tell you that. What I did is when I imported these, so I can just delete this. When I imported them, they were obviously not that color. They came from Illustrator and they were black. So what you can do is you can go to Layer Style, Color Overlay, and hey presto, there it is. There are modes that you can, different modes of color overlays. You can change the opacity. There are lots and lots of things you can do. However, I'm not going to fool around with any of that right now. Let me open this. Now I can change this here, but actually let me do this. Let me open this and then pick a color from here. And as you can see, it's already beginning to look better, but it's not perfect by any means. I need to be able to see what I'm doing, of course. So, first of all, I think I would like this to become a little bit more towards the red. And then with the saturation, actually, no, let me go to the brightness first. I think I want it to become darker, but then I want it to become more saturated. Now let me go back to the hue, and I think I want it to become more red, like so. No, this is too red. This is no longer reminding us of spices. This is now becoming something else. Now what I can also of course do is I can fine-tune it from here. So let me go back to the red and yeah, this is, I think this is what I want. Now I can add this to the swatches. Here it is. So I've made a new swatch for my color scheme as well. Now let's zoom out, and now let's try. And if I do something as complicated like this up top, then I would probably leave the bottom completely alone, not touch that. Let me just close the box here so that we see this actually the way that design is supposed to work. Now let's see. Let me close this and open that. And again, let me open this, open the color overlay, and let's play directly here. Probably needs to get a bit darker. This looks good to me, and I'm going to add that to the swatches as well. Now we have this one here. Let me just move this up. Again, I'm going to go to the color overlay, and let's go, well, let's go a bit more towards the yellow and see what happens with that. No, like this, like this, like this. Let me go to the brightness and make this a bit darker. Yeah. Oh, forgot to add that as a swatch, but no matter. So this is probably how I would think about a color and an additional shape element scheme for this particular logotype, because it has that old-fashioned feeling, and then some other old-fashioned element next to it, rather behind it. And this is my favorite. I think this is the one that I would go with. That one, I think, would be my choice. And I wouldn't use it anyplace else. I would leave it up here. I would leave that bottom part completely alone. What I would do, however, if I am going to do something like this, then I would probably make this a bit heavier. So that it was extra light, so now I've made it light. Oh, and the opacity was low, so let me bring that back up to 100 so that everything is nicely legible. So that would be the first one. So let's continue. What about if I want to add something that is not old-fashioned to the background, but I do want to have some kind of play? So I just duplicated that rectangle, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the Shift and Alt keys so that I can just narrow it down like so, so that it becomes, I think this is a square. It almost looks like a square, but I can fine-tune that later anyway. And then if I just make this black, voila, this looks nice as well, right? And again, I would leave this probably alone up here, but in this case I might actually, since this is such a simple design, well, simple not in a bad way, but just in the sense of being minimalist, I might bring one down here, but then just obviously narrow it down, 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 so that it becomes like a thick thing. No, forget it. Well, hold on. Let me just bring it down here. What does it look like here? Yeah. Here it looks like as if it might work. So that would be version number 2. Now, let's just see if we bring this thing back in here. What does that look like on top of it? Let's look at the other one. No, not this one. And not this one. This one is obviously the nicest one. So let's go back up here. But let's change the color. Let me open the swatches. Let's go for one of the accent colors. How about if I make it like so, so, no, yes, no. See, I'm playing around, I'm trying different things. This here, like this. No, this is obviously out of the question, it's much too dark. Light, dark. I mean, it's very similar to these up here, but let's fine-tune it a bit. Like this, like this. Now we want to reach a kind of perfect color that's going to offset the black and the gray and the text and everything. This looks good to me. I'm going to, I mean, I know that I keep getting the same color over and over again. That's fine. I can always clean it up later. So that would be version 3. Now let's close this. Let's close the other one as well. So we only have this here now. Let me just open our famous box, because we don't want to make a mistake. Okay, now obviously the text now needs to become black again. again, and the stroke needs to become black again. Now here's my, there it is. Now if I were to just bring this up here and let's see, change the color to this, since it's such a tiny little piece of color, then we can actually probably make something that is quite saturated. Make it a bit narrower, and now let's duplicate it and bring it down here. Close the other one. Make sure that they are equal thickness, which I would measure out quite exactly if I was doing this for real, if it wasn't just a tutorial. So I guess this one needs to come in. Let's close the box now. And so this would be another way of doing it, which is a very, very simple, clean, just a tiny little bit of added color. And here, of course, what you could also probably do is, let me see, am I on the top one or the bottom one? I want to be on the bottom one. You could maybe also do this with different colors, so you have the orange here, and then you would maybe go for the accent color here, which is blue. And then, let's see, then you could take this and maybe bring it over here, and then put it exactly in the middle of that. Bring it in so that it's, again, it's just a tiny narrow little thing, and then make that maybe pink. So this could be another way of doing it as well. Here I'm breaking up the symmetry. I'm putting something on one side, but that doesn't seem to be such a big issue. So that would be another way of doing it. Okay, now let's continue on to the left-hand ones. Okay, and now for the left-hand ones. So I'm starting with this one right here. And I think what I'm going to do here is something quite simple. I'm just going to add a big box, like so, halfway, let's see, I'm going to make it so that the bottom, and hold on, let's change the color here, and actually what I think I want to do is I want to make it like a nice bright red. And what I was aiming for was to make this space here and this space here about equal. So His Majesty can move over a bit, and then I'm just going to make the text all white, and then basically say to myself, hey, you're done. That was easy. So what I could also do, what I might try, is I might just try moving this down so that I have like kind of like a reference for that down here, and then I would probably move this address down a bit as well so that it doesn't break away too much. And then I would say to myself, like I said, you're done. And I would leave it red because, you know, he's a Turkish dry goods seller, and dry goods sellers in Turkey are sort of all rah Turkey. So I think that actually works very nicely. Plus it's gray, white, black and red. That's a very nice Swiss style kind of color combination. And he's a contemporary dry goods seller, so Swiss style also works with that. Now, just for the hell of it, I could maybe try playing around a bit and see if I could add some stuff maybe. So let's see, what about if I were to make this black? Whoops, need to bring this one up. How does this work? It's probably not necessary. So I see the cat pops out much more nicely. So that's this one taken care of. Now let's get to this one. So here I want to do something that is actually quite similar to what I did with the other one. I'm going to add a box. Let me just start with the black box first. Now I added a guide here at the bottom of the kutu because I want to stop this box with that right there, because when it comes time to move these over to the envelope and the business card, I would like to have that reference. Now let's see. So here's the slanted cat. Again, this text needs to get white. This text needs to get white. And then we have the address stuff, which also needs to get white, obviously. Now the cat can move over a bit, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this box, duplicate it, move it over, and then give it a color, and then scale it so that the top is aligned with that. And then I'm going to take the cat and I'm actually going to make it darker, 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 which I'm just doing by, okay, let me show it to you like this, image, because what you can do is with vector objects that you have imported, you can apply smart filters. You can apply all kinds of smart filters to them. So I already had a curve here, actually, now that I'm noticing this, that I'm going to delete. But what I'm going to do is, I did it with a keyboard command, but here, let me go here, adjustments, levels, and now I can just go do, and the cat is now black. So, and I made this green, which in the case of an aktar, a dry goods seller, could be associated with all the herbs that they sell. So this is an equal width to this, but I think I want to make this narrower. But should I move all of this over, or should I make this narrower? Because I would like to keep them equal. So let me first do this. Let me take the rectangle and the address and the ticket efendi and the aktar and move them over like so. So I'm going outside of the margin. I'm aware of that, but that's okay. That's not such a big problem. We still have something like a whole centimeter left here. Now I'm gonna take the cat, sorry, the background and the cat, and move them over here. And now, hopefully, I'm hoping and praying that Photoshop is actually going to tell me when these two things are equal, and sure enough it did. So now these two things are equal. The cat can come out a bit more. So let me get rid of the box, which I'm just keeping there for reference. So that would be another one. Would I add something down here? I might not. Let's try it. Let's group these two things. Let's make a dupe. Put something like this, maybe look good. Yeah, why not? Something like this might work as well. Or what might also happen is that you could also maybe do it like this and move it in here, which I think would look even better. Let me just open up the guides. So if I align that with that, so that we have an alignment here, and maybe then also bring it down to here so that no, sorry, I don't want to lose those that equal width, so it would have to stay like this, but this would work as well. So I could leave it like this. I wouldn't have it both here and here. I wouldn't do that. That would be too much. That would be an overkill. So it's either here or here, and I think here actually it's working out quite nicely. So that would be the other left aligned logo taken care of. So we now come to the last one, where I'm not really going to do much at all, because I already have the colorized cat face here. However, I don't like the color of this, so I already have some curves here. Here it is. I have a stroke surrounding it, and then I added some curves. Now I'm also going to add a hue saturation, which again, let me actually go back. Image adjustments, hue saturation, Control U. So let's change the color of this. There, like a nice yellow. So he's now become a yellow tabby. And then another thing I need to do is the stroke here is green. I had put a green stroke. Again, I go layer, layer style, stroke. So let's see. Let's go here. Up like this. A bit darker. And that should do it. So now, and I think we can also make this lighter, so that, well, maybe he got to be too light. Let me just do this again. Now while I'm doing it, it's going to revert back to its original color, but then when I press OK, it'll go back to the filter. And that, I think, is all that this one needs. So that brings us to the end of the color tutorial. Now there's more stuff that we can talk about in terms of making patterns out of these things and things like that, but all of that I will get to when we get to the point where we are exporting these things or putting them onto business cards and envelopes and company folders and things like that, which will be the next tutorial.